All right, good morning. Welcome to the first meeting of the Special Committee on Housing. My name is Joe Alexander. I'm chairman of the committee. There are a couple members that will be arriving late. I know of at least two that are at the crash training upstairs, but they said they'd be crash, but they'll be down a little later. So I first want to open it up by inviting the speaker up to say a few words about this committee, why it was formed, why it's needed, and then we'll go into introductions. So, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, good morning. Why it was formed, because we have a problem. And it's becoming more and more of a problem. I think every time we talk to people that, are trying to expand or trying to get new workers into the state, trying to hire more people, and we obviously have a serious housing problem in this state. So my goal for this committee is to try and come up with some answers. Nobody knows, everybody knows there's no magic bullet. But there's got to be some ways where, and some things that we can do that's going to help the situation, help the people that want to hire, help the companies that want to come to the state, and be able to offer their workers affordable housing that they can come to the state and either rent or buy. There's a lot already out there. I think we have to be realistic about it. I would assume you want to put everything on the table and then start sorting through it. I know there's an awful lot of people that want to come in and talk about it. Being a board of director of Southern New Hampshire Services, they definitely said they want to get involved and try and help, because that's one of the biggest problems they have is housing, for people. So I'm not going to propose any answers to you. I'm not going to tell you what to do and what not to do. What I'm hoping that this committee can come up with some bipartisan answers that we can move forward with, that'll help our people in this state that are looking for housing, and our business owners that are looking to hire more people, and the businesses that would like to maybe come to this state but can't because they can't find a place. And also, that's the same message I want to give to the child care committee that we set up, because it's a twofold problem. Child care is just as much of a problem as housing is right now. And if we're going to continue moving forward, then we have to find some answers. That's it. I'm not going to sit here and propose anything to you, but we've got to find some answers. And hopefully those answers we can put into bills next September when we have our filing period, or that we do have some bills here that we might be able to put some things onto between the Senate and House bills. I'm sure we could find something if you can come up with some solid suggestions and answers. It's in your hands right now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your leadership on this. I know that other branches of government have looked into this, but I think it's important the general court looks at this in particular.
Absolutely. We're the ones that make the laws. Having said that, I want to make sure that, we don't overreact and try and trample on any rights of owners of property or anything of that nature. I think that would be the wrong direction. But I'll leave it in your hands. See what you guys can come up with.
Thank you. Perfect.
And when you're done next week, you will maybe give you something else.
We're going to solve this crisis in a week. That's all it took, right?
Well, hopefully, but realistically, I know this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. It's very complicated. It is, like I said, we all know there's no silver bullets that are going to fix the problem overnight. But and we're not going to fix the problem immediately, but we've got to start working on it. We've got to start coming up with some solutions that'll help.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, so I want to start with introductions. So we'll start with Representative Gibbs. I'll just leave anytime you need me. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just go ahead and click your mic on.
Thanks. Good morning. I'm Merrill Gibbs. This is my first term in the legislature, and I represent Concord Ward 9.
Can you just tell me a little bit about your experience, maybe with housing or
Oh,
this
sure.
issue in
Yes,
particular?
thanks. Yes, I'm retired from the federal government. I worked for 29 years in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. I was a manager in the unit that oversaw civil rights requirements for HUD grantees. So I saw almost all of the grants at one point or another, all of the New England HUD grants generally came across my desk. So I know a lot about housing development and about other types of things that were funded by HUD. And before I went to the federal government, I was director of the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights. That's the state civil rights enforcement agency.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my introduction. My name is Representative Charlotte DiLorenzo. I represent Newmarket and Newfields in Rockingham District 10. My background is that I am a retired affordable housing property manager, and I managed housing in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, for the most part Massachusetts. And I'm surprised that I suppose some of the grants that I applied for probably went across Merrill's desk while she was working at HUD, so I feel kind of a kinship with her. But my experience was in managing, I started out managing like single developments, 50 to 75 units. And then as I gained, knowledge and seniority in my field, I went on to manage large properties, up to 300 units, and then I went on to manage portfolios of affordable housing. Most of the work that I did was in Boston, Suffolk County. And so I did like day-to-day management, like a property manager sitting at their desk, taking phone calls, collecting rents, revising or creating a budget. And then as I, gained more experience, I managed portfolios. So I would have a bundle of maybe 5 or 6 properties that I would be in, and I would supervise all of the employees of that bundle. I was also responsible for compliance. In affordable housing, there are many, many, many rules and regulations depending on the type of housing that you're managing. I think I've probably managed in every affordable housing genre, from home funding, HUD, all types of HUD funding, Mass funding, Maine funding, New Hampshire funding. So I have a very broad knowledge. The last 10 years of my career, I worked for Pine Street Inn, which is Massachusetts' largest housing services agency, and I oversaw their housing. At the time, we had about 500 units. There were scattered site units, and our job was to assist homeless men and women to get into housing. And that was, it was like a real challenge for me. It was a wonderful, wonderful job. I was sorry that I had to retire. And that's it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Representative Scott Wallace from Danville, Rockingham County, District 8. Sorry for being late. I was up in CRAES training. My background is I'm a small landlord, primarily single-family residences, some commercial. We've developed some property over the years. I've owned and operated tenement buildings in Haverhill, Massachusetts, commercial properties in Lowell, and right now, seeing what's going on, it seems to make sense to form this committee and see what kind of work we can get done to improve the housing dilemma that we face here in New Hampshire at this point in time. Looking forward to working with all of you folks, and hopefully we can get these things done. Thank you.
And Joe Alexander out of Goffstown. So I've been involved with the housing issue since I started in the legislature 4 years ago. I was brought in the Governor's Housing Task Force where we, had some policy recommendations, kind of helped shepherd some bills through. Some of these bills passed, some of them didn't, but this issue has obviously been my passion for 4 years now. So I'm excited to get started, and hopefully that we can all come together and figure something out here. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Ben Baruti from Manchester, long time realtor, and back in the 70s I started putting up modular homes, and some of them were for, there was a loan that was out there, Farmers Home Loan, and it was a good way for people with very little or no money to get into a home. Well, this company I worked with out of Kennebunk, Maine, built a special house for Farmers Home Loan. And I put one up, it went okay, and then after that, they would give me an approval list of about 30 to 45 people a month who qualified, because everybody wanted one. But I found out quickly after doing a few that there was really no money in it. I could make a lot more money selling a house, getting a commission, than I could by putting up a home that, for somebody. And it was a great program. I wish it could have continued. I wish there was something that could have been done to, keep the program going and make it more affordable for builders to actually do it. So I go way back before the affordable housing crisis started. Now it's a real crisis. And of course, the big developers are trying to get into it and do it. And a lot of my friends, several friends, I've worked with 4 or 5 people who do developments with affordable housing. And they tell me all their problems. And I said, well, this is a good place to air it all out, and maybe we can do something about it. I don't know if we can. I know a lot of the problems come with the local governments, your planning boards and zoning boards and whatever. But this is a great effort that we're going to put forward. And hopefully we can come up with a solution, and some of these people are going to come in and talk to us. So cross our fingers and roll up our sleeves, and maybe we can get something done. Thank you.
Good morning. Representative Yokella from Rockingham 32. It's Fremont, Danville, and Brentwood. My history on this is the first board I joined in New Hampshire was the Zoning Board of Adjustments. And so that is my longest tenure, and that's because property rights are probably the most important thing. I think that kind of undergirds all of the other rights. And so I'm pretty passionate about that, and I definitely do see that the local restrictions, putting their thumb on the scale, making it harder for people to build and to build in an affordable way. And so I definitely would like to look at that and see if there is, I do that at my own local level. One of the things that I did was petition warrant articles, just reading my local zoning ordinance and all the things that were inappropriate or just over restrictive. One of the first things that I ever did was a petition warrant article to change my local sign ordinance, which was 15 pages, and I cut it down to 1.5 pages, just reading it and trying to come up with a common sense solution that didn't need to be so complicated. And so I've done other things like that as far as just, reading the zoning ordinances that come across, and trying to make some sense of it, because a lot of it is put in at different times, and not a lot of people just read the entire thing and try and make sense of it. And so there were duplications of stuff that I tried to clean up and try to identify. So I think that, the government just making it unclear and making rules you know, trying to do their best, but not experts in the situation can sometimes make more problems than they're solving. And so that's what, one of the big things that I'm trying to reduce, make it easier for people to navigate that system. So, thanks.
Good morning. Representative Josh Adjutant from Grafton 16, representing the town of Enfield. Outside of the legislature, I don't have a whole broad bandwidth of experience with the issue as far as being involved in the actual process. However, I work for Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center up in Lebanon and understand how this issue really plays intersectionally. Because one of the issues that we're having right now, and actually Vice Chairman Brody saw the same presentation in the Labor Committee, was there's retail, which has not really recovered a lot of jobs post-pandemic, and then the next section up above that is healthcare. Dartmouth has gotten around that right now with the travel nurse program because travel nurses will get a housing voucher, and so a lot of their expenses are covered. But at some point, that's going to end up raising costs for the hospital to a point where they're going to have to restrict the travel nurse program, and then they're going to run into the same low staffing issues that surround folks not being able to afford to live in the Upper Valley. I think that is a pertinent example of what the speaker mentioned as far as folks trying to hire. I see that at Dartmouth every day. I overheard a charge nurse the other day say that she had 156 slots to fill and about 80 people worth of slots to put towards that. So it is an affordability issue, but it also definitely is a workforce issue. I look forward to seeing us sort that out, and hopefully it leads to better smoothing of the economy, especially in high necessity areas like healthcare, because that is really being hit hard right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tom Walsh. I'm a representative from Merrimack County District 10, which is the towns of Hooksett and Dunbarton. Starting my 6th term, I've actually been on the Hooksett Planning Board for even longer. That's how I got started. So I bring 13 plus years of experience as both member and chairman of the Planning Board. I've dealt with all the different types of housings, from cluster developments to affordable housing to workforce housing to high density to single family, your duplexes, your triplex, your quads, and the pros and cons of all of them. I don't really have much else to add, except I've seen a lot of this stuff, and it's not stopping. Coming from Hooksett in particular, obviously being next to Manchester, it's a constant swell, if you will, of housing moving into Hooksett. I guess as suggestions go to get started on this whole process, I don't know what your plan is, Mr. Chair, but right out of the gate, I've been thinking since day one that it's, I think, good practice when you're trying to solve problems is to figure out what caused them. So I think that would be a great place to start. Thank you.
Representative Reed.
My name is Ellen Reed. I represent Newmarket and Newfields. That's Rockingham 10. I have 7 housing bills in this year. I'm starting my 4th term. I have 7 housing bills in this year, including one that I am very hopeful has tremendous bipartisan support, and as well as the amazing, surprising support of people like planners, town planners, home builders, and municipal association. What? So I'm really hopeful for that one, and happy to talk about that in detail. But in terms of the housing crisis, the Seacoast, my communities have been hit extremely hard. This is an economic issue about workforce, which we all complain about, but more importantly, it's a human emergency. Just in the last few weeks, we've had 2 people in the state die of exposure, and increasingly, the people who are unhoused are working full-time. They are literally living out of their cars because simply we don't have anywhere for them to go. We frequently talk about this being a supply issue, and that's true, and we need to address zoning issues that restrict the ability to build, and that kind of prioritize rural character over people's ability to live. We need to address that, but we also need to understand it's not simply a supply issue in this state, and this is far away and beyond what the national average is. The national average is that there are 33 empty homes for every single individual unhoused person. In this state, it's 74. So it's not supply, it's not purely building, it's building affordably. So in addition to easing restrictions, we also have to look at incentives to build high quality, and I want to stress high quality, long term. If we can't keep people in homes long term because the housing is not good quality, then it doesn't matter because we're still not creating the stable communities that have stable workforce and stable consumers for our businesses. Having said that, I keep talking about the economic factors. I still want us to always stay in touch with the fact that this is a real human emergency. We cannot lose sight of that. Many of us own our own homes, and maybe it's been a while. Some of us may own our own homes outright even. We need to stay in touch with those actual working class issues and realize that this is an issue of whether or not people feel like they know that they're going to have a roof over their head in the following month, or they're going to be living out of their car. And what do they do with their cat when they have no place? And do they take their kids out of school? And where do they shower before they go into work? This is a real issue that we need to constantly stay in touch with the human aspect of, and not only, yes, address the economic aspect, but not only that, and stay in touch with the human impact. And I guess that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for your introduction. So as the speaker said, I mean, this year we're on a fact-finding mission to deep dive into housing crisis. So our goal is to meet with various stakeholders, department heads, other groups. There's a couple questions that I have just starting out, but after I'd like to open it up to what we're in charge of steering. We can steer it whatever direction we want to steer it. So I want to open it up to have the committee contribute, but these are the first things I'm thinking of. What kind of problems do developers encounter when moving forward with projects? How do we maintain property rights? I'd like to know data on zoning laws, like what the difference between rural, urban zoning laws look like. What changes are towns taking upon themselves? So I'd like to hear from local, I just talked with the chair of the town planning board in Goffstown this weekend. What changes are happening on the town level or city level? What are the conflicts between the state and local? We know some of them, but how can we come to, maybe there's agreement there. How are state agencies involved? Is the state bureaucracy holding up housing development? So I want to look at things like excessive code enforcement. I want to look at how the government can partner with the business community when building housing. So on top of that, the committee may identify bills, as Representative Reed pointed out. There are bills in other committees that have to do with housing. The committee might take one or a couple of particular interest. If there's something that we'd like to take over, we can, especially a retained bill in another committee, it might be something that we could work on over the summer. So we might identify those things, and we can work on that as a committee. So we're not expected to have a final report per se, but I do want to come up with some solid pieces of legislation for September. So we have some sort of a timeline, but the committee is really, we are free to do what we would like to do. So with that, I want to kind of open it up and see what kind of direction. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who wants input or whatever?
Absolutely. So Ben, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Frost. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Legal Officer at New Hampshire Housing. We'll be happy to do a more formal presentation about what New Hampshire Housing is and what we do in the state, but I just want to indicate that we are essentially the go-to place for data on housing in the state, and we will be happy to serve this committee in any way that we can, and to try to provide data and information analysis that you may ask for. So we're very interested in what you do. Very grateful to the speaker for forming the committee, and really happy to be here.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to come up? And Adam, do you?
Good morning. My name is Adam Schmidt. I'm a lobbyist here in Concord. One of the clients that I work with is the New Hampshire Association of Realtors. They're very interested in the subject matter, obviously. The chairman has reached out to see if they might be able to come in and share some information with the committee. I've confirmed that they're willing to do that, so we'll work on a date and a time, and they can come in and share what information you have, and they're anxious to work with you all.
Is there anyone else? Yeah. Just push your button for me. Thank you.
Dawn McKinney, Policy Director at New Hampshire Legal Assistance. One of our largest projects is related to housing. We assist low-income individuals and families, mainly around fair housing and then landlord-tenant law. And we are currently operating eviction clinics in some of the main courthouses in the state, and mainly Manchester and Nashua, and then some other as needed based on the scheduling of landlord-tenant cases. So that's kind of our interest, is just making sure that those folks are getting fair treatment and that their rights are protected. And we're trying to with the goal of avoiding further homelessness, because we know that once you lose your housing, it's harder to get back into housing, and it ends up costing our society financially as well as in other ways. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank
And
you.
we're always happy to present to you about the work we're doing, but I'll let the chairman decide like when and how he'd like that to happen.
Is there anyone else?
Was not planning on speaking today. My name is Lara McIntyre. I work at Sheehan Finney Capital Group, and I represent two clients that have an interest in housing. One is the New Hampshire Community Action Programs. They do a lot of work, they have a lot of contracts regarding housing, especially with the hotels, the federal programs, emergency rental assistance, I believe that's what it's called. Also, one of our clients is Leading Age, which has a lot of continuous care and assisted living facilities, nursing care, and they come at it as an employer and the difficulties that they're facing hiring people because of the lack of affordable housing. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oops, that was close. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jack Ruderman. I work with Ben Frost at New Hampshire Housing. I work on legislative affairs. My title is Public Affairs Manager, and I'm part of our Policy Planning and Communications Division. And as Ben alluded to, we do a lot of research and we issue reports. So, for instance, we put together the annual residential rent survey, which gives us a very clear picture of where costs are in a given year and what the trends are and how much things have gone up or have come down. And I think that is one publication that I think that gets a fair amount of use and is referenced frequently. We also do research on projects, key policy issues. So, for instance, at the moment, we're working on a study on accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and should have a report sometime by the end of March is our target. There was an article over the weekend in the New York Times about granny flats, as they are sometimes called, or ADUs. So in any event, we've got a good team following some of the key issues in housing, and I'll just echo Ben's comments. We're really excited that this committee has been formed and look forward to being helpful in any way that we can.
Thank you. Of course, pointed out, I love the idea of ADUs. I'd like to look more into that. Co-ops, smaller, tiny homes, maybe for younger people just trying to find their first home, or even the elderly trying to settle down in something a little smaller for them. So I'd like to open it up to the committee. I have stakeholders I'd like to hear from, including the New Hampshire Realtors, New Hampshire Housing Finance. I'm a St. A's Hawk, and I think St. Anselm College has a lot of good things around zoning, and they just published a zoning report, so I'd like to hear from them as well, but I'd like the committee to weigh in.
Mr. Chair, I would like to include in the list of shareholders all those who are present today, their organizations, New Hampshire Housing, also Seacoast Workforce Housing, and legal assistance. There may be other groups to add to that, but I want to make sure that both sides of the coin are represented, because while we can help industry, we also need to make sure that we're producing the outcomes that we want.
Representative Baruti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In order to get a unit that's affordable, we have to get there. And the way to get there is with the people who invest in rehabs or construction to build the units to make them more affordable. And I have a list of people that I've worked with in the past, contractors, investors, that would like to come in and tell us how they, number one, get their money, their funding. Construction people on construction, different types of construction. I know when I did my housing for Farmers Home Loan, the materials were entirely different. They were subgrade, but that's all we could use to get people in. And that's another reason why I wouldn't do them anymore. But, and then we have the managers and the problems that they have. So in order for somebody to move into a unit, we have to make it available to get there, and how do we do that? What's the cost? What's the hurdles? And I think that hearing from these people who are in the trenches, doing all the work, I think it's very important that we hear from them.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gibbs and then Representative Atchison.
Thank you. Things that I want to mention are the barriers to the development of affordable housing that I saw while working at HUD, as I said, for 29 years. And there are a number of them. I guess the most obvious one up front is always going to be funding. But one thing that I saw over the course of time was how much more complex the funding became. I saw many, many proposals for affordable housing development, some of which succeeded, some of which didn't. But in the beginning, very often the funding was the funding from the applicant for the grant and the funding that they would request to receive from HUD. Sometimes also they were requesting some funding from, say, the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. But by the time I left in 2016, most of the project proposals that we saw had about a dozen funding sources attached. They were so complex. And obviously, the more funding sources were attached, the more requirements that you had from each funding source, the more complex it was to put them all together, to get all the stakeholders to agree. So I'm not making any suggestions as to how to address that. I'm just bringing that forward as a problem that I saw that developed over time, that is something that we're going to need to work with. The second barrier that I saw, and this is something that is certainly not true only in New Hampshire, but all over New England and I would think all over the country, is exclusionary zoning. That is zoning that forbids multifamily housing, and sometimes even for single-family housing, where you have the requirement for very large lot sizes, to the point where it becomes impossible to create affordable housing because it simply can't be affordable if the lot size is an acre. So that's, again, that's another problem. Some other states have dealt with this by legislation. In Massachusetts, courts have dealt with it in some other states, as in New Jersey. Honestly, the success of these attempts have been limited. But this is always a serious barrier, and again, one that we're going to have to work with. And the last thing I wanted to mention, I was interested to hear Representative Yokela, I'm sorry, Yokela, thank you. Representative Yokela mentioned excessive code enforcement. And that wasn't something that, honestly, I would not have phrased it that way myself, or certainly not phrased it, but I have seen that type of activity be a problem, where code enforcement has been used in what I can only describe as a discriminatory way. That is, and again, I was in the Office of Fair Housing, the Civil Rights Unit, and we saw this sometimes used by cities and towns against certain groups. That is, the code enforcement was stricter against some groups than against others. Also, sometimes it was used to keep out families with children. And this is something, discrimination against families with children is illegal under both federal fair housing law and under the New Hampshire laws against discrimination. It is nevertheless, as I'm sure you all know, still quite common, and something that has been very common for many, many years. Back when I was director of the New Hampshire Human Rights Commission, and I left there in 1987, before it became illegal to discriminate against families with children. But one of the most shocking things that I can remember was people coming to us, families with children who were living in their cars in the winter in New Hampshire because they could not find a landlord willing to rent to people with children. And that was a terrible thing to hear about. So I think those issues of code enforcement can also be a barrier. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, like I said, St. Anselm College came out with a great study regarding exclusionary zoning and a color map of areas of the state which units can be built and how and the zoning laws. So I'd love to kind of see that and have them speak to that research. So thank you, Representative Adjutant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the topic of zoning, on sort of a cosmic level, I would encourage the committee to think about longevity. You know, there's the old quote where Tony Soprano says, "Buy land because they stopped making it." This is going to be a thing where, you know, you look at you look at easing zoning restrictions, and I know that I will want to make sure, as part of that compromise, that there is an active effort to build involved in that process too, because one thing that has always worried me is that easing those restrictions without a guarantee of building is how you end up with, you know, somebody taking 50 acres of land that could otherwise be used for development and building a multi-million-dollar home on it. There's always going to be a larger profit incentive for those sort of 50-acre developments than there would be for affordable housing. So I'm not inherently against easing zoning restrictions. I think that would be a good thing. But I do want to make sure that there's also an additional emphasis on actually producing the units before letting those floodgates open. And then just again, the longevity of it, because, you know, this is going to be a problem so long as there are people on the earth. And I would hate for us to solve this problem for 5 or 10 years and then have to be back here with another select house committee in 5, 10, 20 years looking at all the same problems, really trying to make sure that we're utilizing the land that we have in the most productive and effective way possible, because they're not making any more of it.
Thank you. Representative Reed.
Thank you. So my earlier comment about both sides of the coin, I think Rep. Adjutant touched on that. And that is to say that while I agree with a lot of zoning regulations that need to be undone in communities, because there's been a kind of traditionalist stick-in-the-mud mentality about what those towns, what the people in those towns who perhaps already own their homes outright, want those towns to look like and the idea of rural character. For example, lot minimums, I think, is something that we can talk about because there's ways to increase density and reduce those lot minimums while retaining rural character. There's a design, is actually what I got my master's degree in, a design called Open Clusters Designs, which really retains that rural character while having much smaller lot minimums, increased density. There's also multifamily housing designs that don't look multifamily at all. And again, I think that one of the points needs to be to make sure that we're doing high quality housing. So while we're easing restrictions and going into partnership with industry, we have leverage. We still need to make sure that when that happens, we have a threshold that we want to make sure gets met and we're getting the outcomes that we want. I was glad to hear the chair bring up tiny homes. If you'll permit me a 1-minute story, there was a man in my region, actually in the town of Lee, and I don't know if anybody here represents Lee, named Peter McDonald, who himself, he was a vet and had spent some time homeless as a result of his wounds. He, later in his years, when he came into the ability to own property, he had bought 12 acres and went on a big campaign to do tiny homes for homeless vets and had showcased at all the fairs these tiny homes that he had built for homeless vets. They were completely well appointed and amazing things. I donated money to him, a small amount, but he was really pushing for something great. The town of Lee eviscerated him, completely destroyed him and stymied him at every turn. I think it went to court and he ended up passing away, and there was quite a bit of stress in his life, and I don't know to what extent that contributed to his passing, but that's the kind of thing I would like to see us actually incentivize and help out. And certainly not prohibit. That's something I want to raise. Also, obviously, at any point this committee is ready to talk about ADUs, I am here. I do have lots of support on my current ADU bill.
Thank you, Representative DiLorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I'm interested in is thinking out of the box about housing models. And I noticed that the malls are dying. Shopping malls are dying. And I thought, what a wonderful resource to build a community around. I think you could have home ownership, like in condos. You could have retail. You could have educational facilities and work sites right there. So you have a contained community. I think that's something that we may want to think about pursuing at some point. I think it's down the road, maybe 10 years, but I think we need to think about that.
I love that idea. We're supposed to be creative here. Representative Reed.
I'm just really quickly, because Representative DiLorenzo reminded me of something I wanted to say, which is, in addition, because I know a lot of what we're doing is focusing on rentals and the ability to create rentals and affordable, high-quality rentals, I also want this committee to focus on the problem of home ownership. Because when we're talking about the housing crisis, we're talking about the biggest crisis in the state, but we're also talking about the second biggest crisis in the state, which is the graying of New Hampshire and the fact that we cannot keep and attract young people simply because there's nowhere for them to affordably live. So I think increasing or decreasing the barriers to home ownership in the state, which includes increasing affordability, whether by addressing property tax issues or other market issues, is something that I would like this committee to look into.
Great. Representative Wallace.
Thank you. Yes, that's reusing, repurposing, and recycling any existing structures that are currently vacant is an excellent way to move forward, thinking outside the box, and also embracing the new technology of building that is on the edge of the market. A lot of these other parts of the world and parts of the country using 3D printed homes with styrofoam, concrete reinforced styrofoam. It's very thermally efficient. A blended approach like that, including reform of the snob zoning. I mean, let's face it, 2,000 square foot minimums on a 2.5 acre house lot isn't going to work in this market in some communities, but there's got to be we can find maybe a balance, with these additional dwelling units. Tiny homes, maybe that goes to 1,000 square feet in some of these communities. At least it gives you the ability, because right now, to go and build a 2,000 square foot on the first floor home, let's face it, you're going to be spending in the vicinity of $500 million presently. That's probably not affordable for most young people and first-time home buyers. We've got to get down into that sweet spot, in the 250 to 350 range. And, 1,000 feet on the first floor might get us in that neighborhood with a half-acre lot.
Great. Representative Iacolla.
I'm a little bit more ambitious than $200,000 to $300,000 for a home. And actually, I do mostly think about it more as home ownership than rental. I think of it as like the home that I bought was $100,000. Why aren't we building $100,000 homes? And is it illegal in the state of New Hampshire to build a $100,000 home when there are places in the state that have 10-acre minimum lot requirements? Yes, it is illegal to build a $100,000 home in that part of the state, right? And so, and also, someone was mentioning that how people have over time, like my $100,000 house is built on 0.17 acres. Right? And now my town has a 2-acre lot requirement. So my home to build in my community, matching the character of my street, is illegal. Like you can't one street over build new lots the exact same that my street is. Why is that illegal? It's not because of the historical character. My house has been there since the 50s, right? And it's pre even some of these more restrictive zoning stuff. And so I think that a lot of that, sometimes they're using that stuff as excuses because there already are places in the past that have built on smaller lot sizes. And it didn't, my neighbors are not hurting me and we get all along just fine, right? And so it's not harming the people around it. I think that tiny homes, things built, that someone could buy for under $100,000 that they could get a 30-year mortgage on, and essentially any job in the state could be able to afford the rent of it or the mortgage of it because it's $400 a month. That is what helps like that first starter person that right now there are so many people my age that are, well, maybe a little bit younger than me now that I'm getting older, but are not able to get into their first home because all the houses are $500,000 and you have to be essentially married and have 2 incomes to be able to afford a single mortgage. And so and so where is that person that is 20 that has a full-time job that is wanting to either rent or buy? Why aren't both of those options available to them? Because there's no houses that are possible to be bought at that rate. And these people aren't asking for a McMansion. They just want a place that they can call their own, and possibly once they pay off that, then use that equity to get into something nicer when they want to start a family. Because a lot of the times, some of these restrictions are especially at zoning and ZBA, and when we're trying to change some of that stuff and allow housing to come in, people are very worried about children coming in, and because they're very expensive to teach at the school level. And so there is still some discrimination as far as like, we don't want to allow this development or we're concerned about this development because it's going to cost our taxpayers a lot of money if they happen to have kids or something like that. But some of these smaller homes that my house is not even 1,000 square feet. There's only so many kids I could possibly have in my place, right? Because it's not that big. And so if you build these really small starter homes, they are not necessarily putting a lot of effort on the school system because there's just not enough room to have those. These are starter homes, right? Where you're just starting out, you don't have kids, you're not married, all of that stuff. And so this would create taxpayers that aren't really overburdening the school system and would help them to be able to get to those $300,000 to $500,000 homes that Representative Wallace was talking about. So, thanks.
Thank you, and I actually find it truly unfortunate that my two-bedroom townhouse, the mortgage on that is significantly less than what it would cost somebody to rent a two-bedroom townhouse in this state, and that just goes to the lack of supply of like less homes, but less like smaller, lesser value homes. So, Representative Reed.
At risk of speaking too much, I just want to lift up everything that Representative Yokela just said. I think he saw me violently nodding my head throughout the entire thing. And I think that addressing home ownership has the market effect of bringing down rental rates anyway. So if we get to that core, because I think it's almost animalistic in its need. It's, Maslow's, hierarchy that we have a place, every animal has its den. We need a place to call our own. And while people can live long-term in rentals, if you want truly stable communities, homeownership benefits pretty much every single metric in communities. So really overcoming those barriers to homeownership is really important. There was another thing that you reminded me to say, but I forget it now. So I'm just going to tell you how great you are on this, because we can't agree on everything.
I love this bipartisanship right now. Representative Rudy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we all have good ideas on how to make things more affordable, but a lot of the problem is us. Us meaning the state of New Hampshire, the local zoning and planning boards. Nobody's going to want to give up any of their power. And that's where your resistance is going to come from. No matter what kind of ideas we have, you still have the state with their EPA laws. I know last week, house came on the market, I called a client, boom, we went and looked at it. It was under agreement for 6 weeks. It couldn't get financing because they were going FHA and the well was too close to the septic system by not very much. So they couldn't buy that house. So my client went in, conventional loan, boom, we're all set. So these FHA buyers have these guidelines, FHA guidelines, that are going to restrict them on a lot of things. Our state government, with their EPA laws, are going to restrict people also. So where do we start? I think we start at the top and look at our state laws, and only we can change those. Okay, that's something that we can change. These other things, people selling their homes in Massachusetts, coming up and outbidding every young couple who's been saving for 5 years to get their first home. I'd hate to be a young couple trying to get my first home, being outbid from somebody from out of state, because they just sold their house for a lot of money. They came in with cash. I don't have a prayer. And I see more and more of that. These young people that are really struggling cannot buy their first home. I'm a single guy. I'm showing a restaurant this afternoon, but I've sold a lot of restaurants. And so I eat out all the time. 3 bartenders that I know have to leave to move in with their parents because their landlord's gone up on their rent so much. One of them had to move to Massachusetts to live with her parents. This is a problem that I don't know if we can fix, because it's supply and demand, it's whatever the market will bear, and these landlords are going to charge what they can charge, and there's nothing stopping them. So we have to look at either new construction or loosen up some state laws, because I don't think the cities and towns are going to loosen up that much. It's going to be a battle. And if we can get around it and somehow get them to come around, that's going to be our big challenge, I think.
Representative Wall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Full disclosure, to prove that I am here in a positive manner, I did live in a mobile home. I loved it. I wish I was still in it because I would have retired by now. So, but like I said before, I'm still a firm believer that to solve problems, we need to get to the root of how we got here. So in general terms, I think it would be good information. St. A's might be able to help with this, because I have seen a few of their studies. How long have we been trending in this direction? Is it something that's been happening because of spikes, or has it been a gradual thing? I don't know. As Representative Brody said, the COVID migration, how much of an impact did that have? Nobody wants to talk about it, I'm sure, but in terms of affordable housing, what's the impact of illegal immigration and people seeking asylum just looking for a better life? These people are moving somewhere, and I have a funny feeling they're in what used to be the affordable housing for your bartenders, waitresses, and everybody else. Why I think it's important? Because some of these problems are created by the federal government. And so if we're looking for solutions, then maybe we should be looking at them for some of the financial help. Some of the other information I just jotted down, again, that St. A's may help. There may be other resources. And some of this, I think, was touched on it. I just think it's important information to have. I think you already mentioned it. What and how many towns are already doing things to solve this problem? Because everybody knows about it now. I know we're in Hooksett, we're currently going through our master plan draft as well, and a lot of these changes are being suggested. We're also waiting to get the results of our housing needs assessment that's being done through the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. Another good question to ask, how many towns, municipalities currently comply with the statute that already is in the books in terms of its percentage of affordable housing? There is a statute that says you need to have a percentage of units that are affordable. It'd be interesting to see how this works by the region. Other ones too. Who's not increasing their stock in their inventory? I can tell you right now, Hooksett, we're sitting on almost 1,100 approvals for residents. Some singles, some multifamily, 2 apartment buildings, 1 400-unit assisted living facility, just a myriad across the board. So, I mean, it's not that we're not growing in Hooksett, but I did see a study somewhere, and I can't remember where it was from, that it showed that a lot of the towns in southern New Hampshire, especially Merrimack Valley, have been increasing 200% to 300% over the last 10 years in stock, in inventory. But then the municipalities, your larger ones, your Manchesters, your Nashuas, were only increasing at 40%. So I just think it would be interesting to see what the trends are, who's doing what in terms of making decisions on what needs to change at the state level. I think Representative Baroudi is going to be our biggest one. I think other developers should be coming in here to give us the challenges of why these things aren't affordable to build without funding. So that's information I welcome with open arms. The only thing I'll say in rebut to something Representative Baroudi said it's about the planning and power of, the power of planning and zoning boards. I've been doing this for 13 years. I don't look at my position on the planning board of having anything to do with power. The power in these decisions on the zoning ordinance is the people that live there. Right now, Hooksett is one of many towns that still allows basically a referendum for the people of the town to decide, because you have to agree, it's a trust, what they want their future to look like. There is currently a challenge by the town council to strip the citizens of that decision and to put it within the hands of the council. I am adamantly against that. We want to talk about a bill prohibiting that. I'd be all ears for that. But this is, and I agree, this is challenging. There's a lot of different angles to this, and I just think as many things as we can get from information to get started will put us in the place we need to be to start picking away at it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Baroudi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I've never had a problem with the Hooksett Planning Board. But the point that I made was probably a personal experience I had just before COVID. I was doing a subdivision in Laconia, and it took us 14 months to get approvals. And we went in every month. We'd go in and did exactly what they told us to do. And then finally, when there was nothing else to be said or done, one of the members said, "I just don't like this project because I'm an abutter." That's where it comes in. It's the local people with personal reasons why something won't. And these small towns, you can't get a small town without somebody having a personal reason on whatever goes on there. And it wasn't geared towards Hooksett, but we have a lot of small towns, and I think a lot of small towns do have snob zoning. I did the first cluster of development in the town of Auburn. It was on the books, it was legal, we went in, we mapped it all out, and they held us up. And that was another 14-month process. In the middle, they changed the zoning from 2 acres to 2 acres here and 3 acres over here. They just totally knocked us off rail. So this is a personal thing with planning boards that do things that have, we did get it through, but we lost a couple of units. So, thank you.
Representative Walsh, then Representative Reed.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't disagree, Representative Baroody, that there are some towns that probably operate like that. I don't know if it's the majority. I know I have a speech rehearsed to all the abutters that we, as a planning board, are simply here to enforce the ordinance that are before us and our development regulations. If there are issues between the abutters and the developers, we do the best we can to, find solutions. But I don't know, or I don't want to believe that it's that widespread, that there are that many zoning boards that would use that kind of abuse. So, something we can certainly look at. I just wanted to mention it.
If you get a developer that's got a lot of money invested in a project, a lot of time, a lot of money, and to get thrown off track because of personal reasons, and it does happen in smaller towns.
Representative Reed.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of the data that the representative was saying we need, I agree with all the data that he said we need. I'm hoping a lot of it might be provided by New Hampshire Housing, hopefully, and I'm seeing nods. All right, so I look forward to those presentations and that documentation, because it is something we really do need to get into the weeds and study this and get into the numbers. As far as, zoning and how much of a problem it is. I just have two very quick, because I also, by the way, something else you touched on, not just mobile homes, which anymore are excellent, but all other kinds of non-conventional housing, things like Quonset homes, which have become a huge thing, extremely inexpensive and easy to put up, but more weather durable than even a stick built. Modular homes, these things, we should be investigating these things and making sure that towns are not unfairly prohibiting them or just even accidentally prohibiting them. But in terms of zoning, the two quick anecdotes, I had an idea for a bill, which I ended up putting in. When I put it in, all of my co-sponsors were of the opposite party from me. But at the time I had the idea, I asked a representative who was of the same party as me, and it was to address what is a regressive tax structure, which is property tax, which effectively taxes people out of their ability to own a home, to the point that you could inherit a home outright and not be able to live in it. So I was trying to address this in a fair way, and the member that I proposed the idea to, who was of my party, said, well, if you do that, you'll be attracting all the wrong kinds of people. So, yeah, and I was like, and this is of my own party. I'm like, what? And then the other anecdote is when I was trying to address the ADU situation before COVID, before the crisis was as bad as it is now, I called my town planner asking why we were prohibiting ADUs from being built within a completely pre-existing, completely within a pre-existing detached structure. Because what does it matter? You've already got the footprint down, you've already approved the structure, let someone live there. You can't even tell if you're driving by if someone lives in the garage. And she goes, oh, because I'm talking about the need for more housing. And she goes, we already do enough for, this is our town planner, previous town planner, not our current one. We already do enough for those people. They have the trailers and they have the apartments, to which I had to rebut. I am one of those people, and I'm also one of your representatives, so I have a problem with that. So this is what we're battling, that, and I feel like it might be generational, not to offend anybody, I apologize. It's broad stroke for sure, but there seems to be an old-fashioned mindset about what we want our towns to look like, which doesn't match the realities today. Because you can't just go and buy, like people used to, for like 1 or 2 years income, buy a house anymore. There's no 5-digit houses on the market anymore. So thank you.
One thing our towns want, like myself, I want my town to have my kids living here and not have to move out of state because they can't afford to live here or get a good job. That's what I want my town to look like.
My town in the last year has had hundreds of people, and these are our postal workers, our restaurant workers, young professionals, and veterans have been pushed out, not just out of our town, but out of our entire region and out of the state in many cases. So I sympathize.
Representative DiLorenzo, did you have something?
Oh, I just wanted to say, the syndrome that we're talking about is NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yes. Thank you. So regarding next steps, I think we kind of got a good idea of what we want to do. Do Fridays or Mondays work? I heard from Representative Adjutant has a conflict on Mondays, but does Fridays work for everyone? No. County stuff Friday? Okay. Who has committees on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Unfortunately, I'm on the Commerce Committee, and the Commerce Committee is very, very busy to the point where tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have Commerce Committee meetings and hearings. And it seemed like, okay, this may be just me, I don't know, but if I have any personal business, the only day that I'll have available will be Friday. And I guess I was hoping that if this committee met, it might be more likely to be on Monday. I mean, I'll adjust to whatever I have to, because I think this committee is very important. I guess I'm just putting in a plug for Monday if possible.
Okay. I'm going to try to schedule, Representative Baruti and I came up with one Friday moving forward in the middle of February, but I think a lot of our committee responsibilities will end towards the end of February, early March. We should get most of those bills out of committee. So I'm looking at February 17th, starting at 10 a.m. Have a little bit of a day of it, maybe listen to a couple presentations in the morning, a couple in the afternoon. I've already extended invites to the New Hampshire Realtors to give us a whole all-encompassing description of what's going on. We're going to have a couple developers come in and tell us what their roadblocks are from beginning to end. Representative Baruti will send the invites out. And then I'll also send an invite to St. Anselm College for them to do their presentation on zoning and see if they're available to do that as well. So is there anybody, I mean, this is like the most broad, and we're going to try to zero in once we get more information, but is there anybody else you'd like to hear from at that meeting? Representative Reed.
As I mentioned at the beginning, I would like to hear from New Hampshire Housing as well as New Hampshire Legal Assistance for what the needs actually are. So when we get the data from builders, we can kind of match need with obstacles. Back to scheduling, are you planning, Mr. Chair, on every Monday except for the week of the 13th, in which case it'll be Friday? Or is it the next one is the 17th?
The next meeting will be the 17th, and
I
then
gotcha.
we'll look forward after that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Baruti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you're on judiciary, and they're hearing a lot of real estate bills. Can you pull together some of the bills that we might look at that have problems that we might be addressing here?
Yes, Representative DiLorenzo can help with that as well. We heard a number of landlord-tenant bills last week. Representative Reed, some of Representative Reed's bills, and moving forward, I think there's some where you can find compromise. I'm looking at particular the application fee one. We may be able to, but like I said, I think if these are bills that committees are retaining or holding on to for whatever reason, we can ask that those come to this committee and kind of work on those as well. But Representative Reed.
Not they come to our committee, but have us look at it to see if we have a solution to whatever problem.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea, but also I would like to make sure we do not forget municipal committee, because there are a number of housing bills in the municipal committee, some of which they've already exec, but I think it's still worth us looking and kind of maybe coming up with language proposed for a future year.
And just to add, a lot of these bills may be tabled, and we're able to look at those bills or put them onto a bill that we end up coming together next year. As long as they're not ITL'd and they're tabled, we can still look at those.
First of all, I want to support Representative Reed about needing to work with the municipal committee, because I think it's almost certain that a lot of the issues that we need to deal with in regard to zoning will be before the municipal committee. And then back to scheduling, okay, I don't want to create a problem, and I will reschedule if I have to, but I'm afraid the 17th was the day I loaded all my personal appointments into. But if it's the 17th, I'll do whatever I can to reschedule them.
Just to offer a possibility, understanding that this is after a 2-day session, a potential 2-day session in the beginning of February break, I don't have anything on the 24th.
Nor do I.
So I'm going to have the committee stand by on a future date, and I'll look with consultation with Rep. Rudy on a day for us moving forward. And what? And we will, I'll coordinate with the relevant stakeholders and make sure they get invites to this. And I'm hoping to do like kind of a longer day with this, so we can have, 3 or 4 pretty heavy presentations and get a holistic approach to this. So maybe a morning and afternoon session. So with that, does anybody else? Go ahead.
So,
Representative.
sorry, should I go ahead and reschedule those things for the
Well-
17th, or wait until I hear from you?
If you can, and just follow up with me in the next day or two, that'd be helpful for us, because I
Okay.
can't start scheduling these stakeholders until
Right,
we have
right.
the
I'll-
approval of
I'll
the committee. Okay?
Started that as quickly as I can.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
It's penciled, yes. Pencil it in. Right. Is there anything else come before the committee?
Well, I'm on municipal and county government, so I can, and I don't care which Friday or Monday, but I think a lot of the stuff coming out of municipal and county is going on consent. And we're pretty much going to be done. I think we have like 6 more bills to hear, and then we're going to like exec everything, and maybe we have some second committee bills or something, but pretty much everything's going to be disposed of pretty soon out of municipal and county government.
But I do think it's a good point that even if we table them on the floor, they can be reintroduced for next year.
Or, right. we can
A
work on
version that
language
we
this
work
summer.
on, I mean, yeah.
Right.
But
Perfect.
if they're ITL'd, even on consent, if they're ITL'd, then no representative would be able to bring forward substantively similar language next year.
So that might be something to say to your committee, if there's ever a possibility that instead of ITLing, you can table it. That might be something, or retain it. That would be something helpful for us.
I'm not sure that yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure that the housing stuff, I'm not sure that we have exec yet. But, well, yeah, that's, yeah, that's, I don't think that those, I think that one is going on the floor.
No, the big one is on the floor, was not consented to, but the informational only one was on consent.
Informational one. I'm not sure exactly.
Perfect. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.